Speed has always had a crown, and only the boldest machines have dared to wear it. For nearly a century, the title of fastest production motorcycle has passed from one legend to the next, from the raw thunder of the Vincent Black Shadow to the bullet-shaped fury of the Suzuki Hayabusa. These bikes weren't just built for speed. They were statements. They told the world what was possible, mechanically, culturally, even philosophically. But in 2007, that legacy was shaken. A name that had long faded into the margins of motorcycle history, MV Agusta, stepped back onto the stage. And it didn't come quietly. It didn't just build another superbike. It built the bike. One that broke the unspoken rules. One that dared to go faster when the rest of the world had agreed to slow down. This isn't just the story of a motorcycle. It's about pride, defiance, and the beautiful Italian fury known as the F4 312R. Long before motorcycles had fairings or fuel injection, they had something else: ambition. In 1907, while most of the world was still getting around in wagons, Glenn Curtis climbed aboard a motorcycle he'd built himself. It had a V8 engine, no front brake, and practically no suspension. But that didn't stop him from twisting the throttle and tearing across the sand at 136.36 miles per hour. For a brief moment, Curtis wasn't just the fastest man on two wheels, he was the fastest man alive. That record lit a fuse, and over the next 100 years, it never really went out. The British brought elegance and muscle, with names like Bruce Superior and Vincent. In 1948, the Black Shadow emerged. Its deep black paint and massive V-twin engine could push it to 125 miles per hour, an astonishing number at the time. It wore the crown for decades, a looming shadow over every challenger that followed. But speed never sits still. By the late 1960s and early 70s, Japanese manufacturers Honda, Kawasaki, Yamaha, and Suzuki entered the ring. With innovations like overhead cams, inline-4 engines, and disc brakes, they began rewriting the rulebook. Bikes like the Honda CB 750 and Kawasaki Z1 pushed past the 120 mile per hour mark with ease, all while being affordable and reliable. Still, it wasn't until the 1980s that the true horsepower war erupted. Kawasaki's GPZ 900R, Suzuki's GSX-R, Yamaha's FZR 1000, they weren't just fast, they were futuristic. And by the 1990s, the top speed barrier crept past 170, then 180. And finally, in 1999, Suzuki dropped the bomb, the Hayabusa. With a GPS-confirmed top speed of 194 miles per hour, the Hayabusa wasn't just faster, it was a declaration. A falcon tearing across the sky, named quite literally to hunt the blackbird. And suddenly, the world hesitated. Politicians raised eyebrows. Safety boards started asking questions. Behind closed doors, the major Japanese manufacturers shook hands on a quiet deal. A gentleman's agreement to cap production motorcycle speeds at 186 miles per hour. Just like that, the crown was locked in place. For the better part of a decade, no one dared reach past it. But across the ocean, in a small Italian workshop, someone had other plans. While Japan kept the crown tucked safely behind a speed limiter, one company never signed the deal. In 2007, from the northern Italian town of Varese, MV Agusta, a name nearly forgotten outside of racing history books, announced its return. But this wasn't a quiet comeback. This was a challenge, a statement, a declaration that Italy wasn't content to sit back and let others define the edge of possibility. Under new ownership, MV had already begun rebuilding its reputation, one handcrafted high-revving sport bike at a time. But to mark its 10th anniversary since Rebirth, they wanted something more, something outrageous, something worthy of their roots. They turned to a legend. Massimo Tamburini, the brilliant mind behind the Ducati 916, often called the most beautiful motorcycle ever built. Working closely with a team of engineers, including some with experience at Ferrari, Tamburini helped create a machine that would reject compromise, ignore limits, and poke the sleeping giant of Japan. The result was the F431R. Even its name wasn't subtle. 312 referred to 312 kilometers per hour, or exactly 193.8 miles per hour, a number that stood as both its target and its taunt. It was a middle finger to the gentleman's agreement, a challenge written in speed, painted in Italian red, and signed in the language of rebellion. The F4 platform had already gained cult status for its sculpted form and exotic feel. But the 312R would be something more, not just beautiful, but ballistic. It wasn't born from a marketing brief. It wasn't tuned for comfort or fuel economy. It was a machine designed for one thing: to go faster than anyone else dared, and to look breathtaking while doing it. MV Agusta didn't want to win the sales charts. They wanted to win back the soul of speed. In a world that had collectively agreed to slow down, the Italians decided to step on the gas. And with the 312R, they didn't just build a superbike, they built a declaration. The F4 312R didn't just chase speed, it turned the pursuit into something breathtaking. One glance told you this wasn't built in a boardroom. It was sculpted like a piece of rolling art, the kind of machine you didn't just ride, you admired. 4 underseat exhausts flaring out like the pipes of a symphony, a single-sided swing arm showing off the rear wheel like a trophy, minimalist fairings drawn tight like the lines on a racehorse. From any angle, the F4 looked aggressive, elegant, and unapologetically Italian. But this beauty wasn't skin deep. The 312R carried a reworked version of MV's high-revving inline-4 engine, already exotic by any standard. But now, it breathed even harder. Inside were titanium valves, forged aluminum pistons, and larger throttle bodies designed to gulp air at terrifying RPMs. Engineers raised the red line to 13,400 RPM, tuned cam lift for maximum flow, and lightened internal components for razor-sharp throttle response. Power climbed to 183 horsepower at 12,400 RPM, backed by 62.7 pound-feet of torque at 10,000 RPM. Displacement held steady at 998 cubic centimeters, a liter-sized engine tuned with Ferrari-influenced precision and Italian defiance. The compression ratio was an aggressive 13.1 to 1, and everything from the crank to the cooling system was designed to run on the ragged edge of mechanical sanity. This engine didn't roar, it screamed, and it begged to be revved. To keep the bike planted at nearly 200 miles per hour, the chassis was fine-tuned with surgical precision. The 312R wore lightweight forged wheels to reduce unsprung mass and rotational inertia. It had Brembo radial brakes with upgraded calipers, revised suspension geometry, and tires optimized for high-speed stability. A larger radiator and oil cooler kept everything from melting at full tilt. And then there was the riding position. Low, tight, committed. This wasn't a bike for long cruises or casual commuters. It demanded attention finesse, and a bit of courage. But if you gave it that, if you leaned into its challenge, it responded with something few machines ever deliver: a connection. It was a race bike for the road, a sculpture that moved, a machine that didn't just go fast, it looked fast standing still. The 312R wasn't built to please everyone. It was built for those who could recognize perfection, even when it came at a price. And for those who did, it offered something unforgettable. MV Agusta didn't just talk a big game, they backed it up with numbers, records, and a thunderous run across the salt. In August of 2007, the F4 312R was taken to one of the most unforgiving proving grounds on Earth, Bonneville Salt Flats. Under the harsh sun and thin air of Utah's high desert, the bike screamed across the surface, holding nothing back. The final result, a GPS-verified average speed of 193.57 miles per hour over a 7-mile run. At the time, it made the 312R the fastest production motorcycle in the world. But Bonneville wasn't the only place it made history. The 312R also took to the Nürburgring, the legendary German track known for chewing up lesser machines. There, it didn't just survive, it dominated, setting new benchmarks for production superbikes in terms of lap times and stability at speed. And unlike many exotic machines that live their lives on glossy showroom floors or tucked beneath covers in private collections, the 312R wasn't a trophy. It was meant to be ridden. Yes, it was expensive. And yes, it wasn't built in massive numbers, but it wasn't a unicorn either. MV Agusta produced the F4 312R in real quantities, making it available to riders across Europe, the Middle East, and select high-performance markets in the United States. It was priced for enthusiasts, those who understood what it represented and weren't afraid to push it to its limits. For every collector who kept one pristine, there was another rider who took theirs to the track and let it breathe. And in that moment, brief as it was, the balance shifted. For the first time in nearly a decade, the title of fastest production bike didn't belong to Japan. It belonged to Italy, not to Ducati, not to Aprilia, but to a company once left for dead, now roaring back with fire and fury. MV Agusta didn't just break the gentleman's agreement, they shattered the silence. And with the F4 312R, they reminded the world that when you build from the heart, not the spreadsheet, records don't just fall, they kneel. The F4 312R was never just a motorcycle, it was a declaration. In a world where performance was being quietly capped and conformity was the new normal, MV Agusta didn't just raise its hand, it raised hell. The 312R stood as a middle finger to limitation, a beautifully engineered act of defiance against the idea that motorcycles should stop getting faster, stop dreaming bigger, stop daring more. It didn't do this with brute force alone. It did it with grace, with style, and with soul. Where the industry leaned into traction control, electronics, and restraint, MV leaned into feeling. The F431R reminded us that the best machines weren't always the ones built by the biggest brands. Sometimes, the greatest breakthroughs come from smaller shops, driven not by spreadsheets, but by obsession. The kind of obsession that spends weeks shaping an exhaust by hand. That agonizes over engine note as much as horsepower. That paints speed not just in numbers, but in emotion. This wasn't about chasing sales targets or topping magazine reviews. This was about bringing passion back to the throttle. The 312R helped pave the way for machines like the Kawasaki Ninja H2, a supercharged monster that would eventually top 200 miles per hour. But while the H2 was engineered to stun, the MV was designed to seduce. One used brute force, the other used art. Both were legends, but only one did it before the world asked for it. And that's the lasting mark of the 312R. It didn't wait for permission. It didn't follow trends. It didn't care what the others were doing. It simply existed because someone, somewhere inside MV Agusta, still believed that motorcycles should stir the soul, not just scare the senses. In the end, when the rest of the world agreed to slow down, MV Agusta twisted the throttle, and the F4 312R became the last great scream of analog speed, wrapped in the body of a dream. The F4 312R was never the fastest bike of all time, but it was the one bold enough to cross the line. It dared to challenge an entire industry, and it reminded us that sometimes, to move forward, you have to be willing to break the rules. So what about you? What do you think of this Italian rebel? Do you believe speed still has a place in today's world? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your stories, your opinions, and the bikes that still make your heart race. And if you enjoy exploring machines that run not just on fuel, but on passion and defiance, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell, because there are still more legends waiting to be told. And the next one might just be the one you've never heard of.